นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนัมมัสสามิ Blessings, everyone. Good evening. Today is Chinese New Year, which has meaning for many people in Australia and in other Asian countries. Time when relatives come together, even friends, relatives come together often for food, visit each other, give gifts, red packets. The Buddhist perspective may be like we just chanted, anicca-nusati, recollection of impermanence. Another year has gone by. 1 year of our life is finished. Our life is getting shorter every day. And that's the impetus to continue to study and learn what the Buddha taught and put it into practice. And coming together as a family, say at Chinese New Year or Western New Year or Thai New Year, whichever New Year, is part of our practice. You're learning to appreciate each other in the family, particularly, say, elder relatives who are easily forgotten, who may have contributed a lot in the past. New Year is a good time to bring up gratitude, appreciation for those who have helped us. Elders, teachers, friends, relatives. And that's part of our practice, as well as remembering the impermanence. As you remember that there are those people who have helped you, the opportunity to do something for them or give something back is slipping away as well as time goes by. And the Buddha mentioned that there's two kinds of people in the world who are very rare. The first is that somebody with gadanyu, with gratitude, appreciation for those who have helped them. And the second kind of rare person is someone with gataweti, somebody who's looking for ways to give something back to those who have helped. So another year ends, another year begins, an opportunity to give something back is there, but it's running out and we just don't know how long we've got. So take your opportunities while you can. Forgive those who need to be forgiven. Set your heart on helping those who need to be helped, who you can help, because there'll always be somebody in our lives or that we come across who maybe can benefit from our help when we often underestimate our own ability to help others, do things for others, or sometimes we become complacent. Like that story in, I think it was Metropolitan Paris yesterday, the 80-year-old man who went for a walk and slipped over in the ice and the cold and was stuck on his back for many hours, and people just walked past him until he died of hypothermia. And the paramedics said if just one person had stopped to call them earlier, they could have saved his life. And that's quite a common theme in our cities now, is that we're often very indifferent to the people around us. Because there's so many people, and we don't know who is who. I've seen it before when I worked in the City of London, walking along the road, especially in the winter, and somebody has fallen over and they're just lying there, and it's an area where there's maybe a lot of homeless people, drug addicts. And the tendency is just to want to rush on because of the cold, because you're going somewhere, and you think maybe that person is just drunk or out of it, but they could be dying. And these are just extreme examples, but there's always people around who could use some help in some way or other, some assistance, advice, support. It could be family member, relative, or stranger. So it's almost like a state of mind, an attitude you develop. And the Buddha encouraged us to develop this every day. The thought, how can I help? What more can I do? Putting other people's needs at least on the same level as your own, sometimes ahead of our own, but at least on the same level as our own. Because we gain a lot from that. It's one of those silent gains, or kind of very subtle, quiet kind of ways we learn about ourselves, learn about the world, learn about life. It's by helping others. When you help others with a pure intention, you're maybe not looking for anything in return, but you gain so much because you learn about life, don't you, when you help others. When you look at other people's problems, maybe try to assist them through their problems. Perhaps that helps you to put your own problems into perspective. And you realize maybe your own problems are not so bad. Perhaps someone else has worse trouble than you. Or at very least you realize that everyone has problems and it's part of life and you don't need to make such a big deal out of them. Because much of our suffering in life is made through our own exaggeration or creation of big dramas and emotions in our mind out of things that are often very ordinary. So Buddhism is founded on the principle of generosity of heart, putting that into practice through speech, through action, helping others materially, helping others through spiritually, giving forgiveness, giving support, advice, warmth, in so many ways. And we learn in our own practice from that. Ajahn Chah once said that he'd gained most of his insight and wisdom in Buddhism, in his practice, after he began the monastery, Wat Nong Bapong, where he lived. He spent about 15 years in the forests of northeast Thailand, literally putting his life on the line, encountering wild animals, tigers, wild bears, snakes, elephants, disease such as malaria, dengue fever, cholera, typhoid, all kinds of problems, very little material support. And he certainly would have learned a lot from those experiences. He developed deep states of samadhi, deep insight into the selfless nature of phenomena. But he said he actually gained the most wisdom once he started teaching others, training the monks, teaching lay people at his monastery, which began to grow from the mid-1950s when he started it. Because when you help other people, you're helping yourself. We sometimes forget that, because we get so caught up into our own personal problems and issues that we can't see the wood for the trees. We can't see other people when we're so obsessed with ourselves and our own problems. There's one way of diminishing or reducing the impact of your own problems is by helping others, and they sort of fade a little bit, or the importance you give to them fades. Maybe you realize you have hidden qualities, strengths, energy that you can apply to others and help others, and then that can come back to yourself and you help yourself. Of course, you have to know the limit and the balance in helping others, because physically we only have so much energy available in this, our human form, and we can give so much that we end up punishing ourselves or hurting ourselves, get too tired, too burnt out. Mentally, we can also become frazzled helping others. So you have to know your own limits, and you have to know how to recharge, re-energize yourself through your own practice, which again is something Ajahn Chah emphasized. He says he used to say you have to make your own practice solid and firm inside, so that when you give to others and help others, you're not damaging your own spiritual practice on the inside. Your mind still is peaceful, calm. So what you share is what you can share, what you've got left after having developed the good qualities in yourself first. And that may vary from person to person. And we can't always look at other people and say, how much I'm going to help, I must help as much as that person or that person does, because everyone is different. Some people have a lot of physical energy, some people have a lot of mental skills, knowledge. But we're different, and we can't always assume that we'll be able to do things in exactly the same way as our peers or our teachers. So the practice of dana is something that is a skill that you learn like every other part of the practice. You learn by applying yourself. Sometimes you try too hard and get frustrated and you step back a bit. Other times you don't do enough and you have to kick yourself up the backside to make yourself do more. But you learn. And our practice is like that, is learning. And you see what you need to learn by reflecting and reviewing your practice. So like New Year time, whichever New Year it may be, it's a time you can review your efforts in the practice, what's happened the last year, what you expect this year. And someone was asking today, how can you tell whether your practice is going well or not? Well, you have to review over a period of 1 year or a few years and say, well, am I more peaceful than before? Is my mind brighter, more peaceful than before? Or am I getting darker, more depressed, more gloomy, more unhappy than before? Day by day you'll see changes in your practice, ups and downs. And that's normal, but over a long, sustained period of time, we can maybe make some judgment there and say, things are going in the right direction. My mind is more peaceful than before, more tolerant of problems and difficulties, more patient. I find it easier to find kindness and compassion than before, less irritable, less selfish. Or maybe you're going in the wrong direction and you're more selfish than before, less compassion, more irritable, more angry than before. And we have to be honest when we do our self-monitoring, self-appraisal. A bit like when checking for COVID, if you're really checking for COVID, you have to admit it. If you've got COVID, well, you've got it. A lot of people don't like to admit it because there's so much stigma and bad perceptions around COVID. Perhaps we don't like to admit to other people or even to ourselves. But in the practice, you really want to progress, we have to look at what's working and what's not, what's improving, what's not, and then adjust as you go along. Today we got a picture sent to us from Thailand where last week I helped, we had a ceremony making a Buddha statue. A new Buddha statue was cast out of bronze. And Luang Por Anand and Ajahn Nyanadhammo were kind enough to join in with many other monks and lay people as well. And you cast it in a ceremony where the monks are chanting the parittas and continuously developing a very good energy and meditating and blessing the mold that is heated up, and then the bronze is heated and people offer pieces of gold, solid gold, jewelry or little pieces of gold which is melted in as well out of respect, worship for the Buddha. And we cast that Buddha, and then the people who make it at the factory, they leave it to cool down for many days. And then they gradually break open the cast, or the cover of the cast, so it's like clay and white plaster that surrounds the molten bronze, which is now settled and cooled. When they break it open, the Buddha doesn't yet look perfect. It looks good. It looks like a Buddha. You recognize the original design that you made, and that was made out of wax and took many months to design and craft by an artisan. And there were little changes made here and there. But when the Buddha is cast, there's always some blemishes that need to be polished and ground, because it's an imperfect art in the sense that you're working with natural things and they need to be blended together and worked on to make them finally presentable to be sent over here to Australia for the monastery in Adelaide. Ajahn Chah used to use this as an analogy for our practice. You work with the wax first, shaping it, making every detail look right, and you get the proportions right, different angles, different perspectives, and depending on what vision you have, your vision of the Buddha, and it's a mixture of your vision and the artist's vision, and you gradually work towards a goal. But then even when you've got your wax figure, that gets melted away and replaced by the molten bronze. So you never get quite perfect bronze Buddha from day one. You still have to polish and work with it and grind off some rough edges and fill some holes that may be there until you finally work to get the nice, shiny, complete, perfect Buddha. Ajahn Chah used to say, our practice is like this, we're always working on it ourselves. And if you work with wax, well, it's doable. You can add a bit here, remove a bit there, push a bit in here, pull a bit out there, make it slimmer here, make it fatter there, put a few lines and curves there, add some bits and pieces here and there. There's plenty to work with wax. And that's like our mind and our practice. You're working with the raw material, which in the beginning is just a lump of wax. Doesn't look like anything. But there's potential there. And because the artist has done it before, he or she will have an idea in their mind what they're going towards, and you as the sponsor maybe, you have your idea, and you can work from that beginning point of just a lump of wax, which means nothing, and start shaping it and working towards the goal. And we're working with our mind and our practice, pushing it and shaping it and moulding it with a goal in mind, but we have to keep at it. And there'll be mistakes along the way. And sometimes they make the nose too big or too small, or the ears too big or too small, or Something's added that shouldn't have been, something's taken away that should have been left in. That's practice as well. With your practice, whether it's on the level of dana, generosity, you're learning as a skill how to practice generosity skillfully. Practice of meditation, just the same. Nobody sits down and has perfect meditation from day one. It's a skill you learn, and it may be a lifetimes of learning. But that's okay, as long as you have the attitude that you're learning from your experience. And like the wax, you observe what's going on in your mind as you practice meditation. So the best way is meditate every day, at least a bit, and you'll get to see your own mind and know your own mind. And those bits that are undesirable, well, you recognize them and you start working on how to abandon them. And those parts that are desirable, well, you start bringing up and developing and maintaining and cultivating the best you can. And as your knowledge and experience increases, well, you get better at it, hopefully. But you also have to review periodically, don't you? You review your practice. Sometimes, like making a wax figure of a Buddha to be made into a statue, sometimes you just have to stop. Your mind is too obsessed or too caught up in the fine detail maybe, and you have to stop and step away, put your tools down for a few days, go away, do something completely different, and then come back with a fresh pair of eyes and see what was needed to be changed, what's okay, what's good. And that's all right. Even meditation, sometimes we just pause, don't we? We stop. Say, I can't meditate anymore. I'm just obsessed with my mind, trying to control the breath or the mind too much, squeezing it, pushing it, hurting it even. Sometimes we need to take a break. Or if we're doing sitting meditation, we take a break, we go and do walking meditation and just have a nice relaxed period of walking meditation. Change the atmosphere, change the posture. And you can use change as a skillful way just to get a new perspective on something. Other times you realize you can't stop, you can't pause, you have to just keep going because you're right on the mold, you're right on the detail. If you stop, you'll lose your train of thought, your concentration, so you just keep at it. Push through the tiredness, the different obstacles coming up, you just push through them. So at different times, a different approach is needed maybe. And as you get more experience, you recognize when is the time to really push and stay on it and stick with the little details. And then when is the time to step back, let things go, take a more long-term vision of it. And again, you can't always just compare with other people. You have to see what works for you at that time, in your practice at that time. But practicing with others and having teachers, friends, and helping others, you learn because you learn many different perspectives, see things from different angles. Which is Ajahn Chah's point. When you help others, you learn a lot about yourself as well. It's not simply a one-way thing. In helping others is like you're losing all your own time, your own effort, your own knowledge, your own skills, your own things. And you help others, you'll gain all kinds of unexpected things out of that. So whether it's making a wax model of the Buddha that will eventually become the basis for a solid bronze Buddha statue, or working with your mind, you could say it's a work in progress. And have that willingness to learn even from the mistakes and the blemishes and the faults. Really, that is where we learn. What goes well, you probably know already. You know what goes well, what works well. Doesn't take a lot of thought. But where there are obstacles, blemishes, well, that's where you need to give wise consideration. So in the practice of meditation, the 5 hindrances, you're learning how to deal with different kinds of desire that fill up your mind, or the irritation, aversion that comes, especially when you have painful feelings in the body, or sloth and torpor, drowsiness, or endless anxiety, worries, or doubt. The working with the hindrances at first seems hit and miss. You put effort in and doesn't seem to get anywhere, and then one day you have a good meditation and it's like, what did I do different today? Nothing. Why should it be peaceful today and not yesterday? At first it seems like that, but as you practice more, you gain an understanding of what are the hindrances and what works to overcome them. And you realize it is a skill, and there's knowledge you gain. That's like the artist who does a lot by just intuition, and they make the Buddha statue. They can go a long way just on intuition and feeling their way. But then the finer detail, maybe they do also need to really consider things and look what needs to be done. Say, to let go of a particular hindrance, you might need to give it consideration and say, well, this anger I feel towards somebody or some situation is really blocking me in my practice. What can I do about it? You can't let go of it yet. You know the anger's there, there's the feeling, painful feeling, tension. There's negative trains of thought based on it. You can't let go of it yet, but you may recognize it as a problem. That's the first step, isn't it? So you step back, you say, okay, I've got this problem, I feel angry. Maybe it's a repeated thing, I feel angry over and over again. What can I do about this? And then you start looking for the skillful ways. It's like with anger, the hindrance of anger, the Buddha said, you have to see and find the good in yourself and the good in another person, connect with that, so that you're not just stuck on your own self-aversion or aversion for that person. And everyone has some good in them, somewhere, from the past, from the present, or the potential even for good in the future, but there'll be some good in even the person you hate or you're angry with, or yourself if you're angry with yourself. That's what you've got to bring up, don't you? And work on it in order to set aside the aversion and bring up something more wholesome, skillful, and bright in the mind. So the Buddha said, you've got to be really careful if you're thinking of a person you're angry with. You can't just wade in there, should have loving kindness for them, and assume you can do that. Maybe your first thought of that person, it just brings up more anger, so you have to really tread carefully. That's the problem. But it's a problem, so then you start looking for skillful ways. And the Buddha said, he gave that simile of the water after the heavy rain. Like today we've had this hot weather, now we've had the rain, so there's a few puddles around. He said, imagine the amount of water you would have in the hoof print of a cow, or if it was this monastery, the hoof print of a deer, because they're pretty heavy. You get a little bit of water in that hoof print. But you can't scoop it out, because if you scoop it up, your hand is already too big. It will get mud with the water and you ruin the water. You don't want to drink it. And that's like thinking of the person and straight away going into anger. You get the angry thoughts clouding your peaceful, pure state of mind that you're trying to develop. But if you lie down, completely lie down and just put your mouth over the hoof print, you can suck up or sip up some water without getting mud. That's like somebody who's really seen the problem, seen the danger, the obstacle, but they've seen there's a solution. If you're very careful, can put their mouth over the hoof print and just get the pure rainwater without the mud. It's like someone who's really worked at it and can see the good or the potential for good even in someone who's made them angry. They don't have to stick with the anger now. Now they can focus on the good. And the people who make us most angry are often the ones closest to us, and we actually have all the information there to bring out and say, okay, I hate them, I'm so angry with them, but they did do this good thing, that good thing, etc., until you can tolerate in your mind. It's like getting the rainwater without the mud. And you can see the potential for good, wish them well, wish them to improve, wish them to change in a good way, but without anger. That's like the skill of solving a problem, seeing how to do that, using what you've got, rather than rushing in there, ruining it, getting just muddy water. You use skill and time and patience and effort, and you think about it and consider it until you can find that way to think of the person without getting angry. Then you can experience a normal state of mind towards that person or that situation or yourself, and then you've won, haven't you? Because you know you can be normal with what used to make you angry. And that's the best victory. And in the same way, you may have desires overcoming you that keep obsessing your mind, blocking your meditation. What on earth can I do about this? Well, you have to look at how you can solve the problem. Look at it from different angles. Ajahn Chah used to say, with desire you have to accept. Practice involves a certain amount of letting go, not giving in to the desire. So you weaken it and then letting it go. You can't have your cake and eat it. You have to accept part of the practice means giving up desires. Not every desire, but recognizing that unmindfully following desire leads to suffering, leads to attachment, obsession, clinging, identification, and eventually suffering. And it sounds boring and unpleasant and unattractive to give up desire, because desire we tend to associate with pleasure and getting what we want, having good things. We have to see there's a higher happiness of the mind that doesn't need anything to be happy, anything external. The mind that can give up desire, that can make choices, take it, leave it, have the cake or leave it. That's mental freedom. That's a skill that we have to learn, how to say no to certain desires if we can see that they're harmful, obsessive, causing us suffering. It's another reason why dana and generosity is so useful. Because if you also practice giving away things, whether it's material things, time, energy, knowledge, or you're learning to give up certain desires, the desire to be selfish, just to indulge your own personal wants or needs. You give that away by helping someone or giving up something that you wanted or had. If you're doing that with full mindfulness and understanding, then you're letting go of desire, and you can see that you're letting go of desire, and the happiness of letting go is a kind of higher happiness, as a relief and a sense of freedom. If I don't have this, I can still be peaceful and happy. If I share it with someone else, I can still be happy myself. Again, this is a skill to know when to let go, what to let go of. And we sometimes make mistakes there. We let go of the wrong desire too quickly and we just make ourselves miserable and put too much pressure on the mind, and it's too difficult, and the mind doesn't settle down in meditation. We're pushing too hard. So you have to, again, stop and think it through. But if you can see there's a certain desire that is a cause of suffering over and over again, agitates the mind, won't let your mind settle into peace, well, that's probably telling you something, isn't it? You've got to find a way to set that aside. Appreciate the more subtle peace of mind that comes from letting go of desire. Like, when you're younger, you're learning about the world, finding out things, enjoying the world, indulging, pleasure, travel, people, all kinds of new experiences. Well, we tend to get attached to the highs and the excitements and the pleasures. As you get older, and particularly if you're practicing mindfulness and practicing meditation more, well, you realize those highs and the excitement, the pleasure isn't sustainable, doesn't last. It's anicca, it's impermanent in its nature. And a lot of things over time you realize, they can't give you the same pleasure every moment, every time. So you start to feel more neutral, even indifferent. And some people mistake that for a problem, and they think, oh, meditation is making me indifferent to the world, I'm just giving up all my desire, there'll be nothing left. It's because they've invested so much of a sense of self in always feeling high, excited, stimulated. But actually it can be coming from wisdom and insight, where you realize those highs and the excitement is impermanent, it doesn't last. And when you see that clearly, well, of course, a certain sense of indifference might arise, but within that indifference there's peace of mind. It's not the indifference of dullness or coldness or not caring. It's simply recognizing that you can't sustain a sort of high in life all the time, even from meditation. You can't always sustain bliss. You can't always sustain joy and rapture that comes from helping people or getting spiritual achievements and attainments. The good things are good, but they don't last. And accepting that and recognizing the impermanent nature of even joy and happiness from spiritual practice is insight, isn't it? So a word Ajahn Chah would use a lot is thamada, ordinary. It's just ordinary. The awakened mind gets used to the ordinary. Doesn't mean to say you don't have any joy or can't appreciate things that bring you joy, pleasure, happiness, but you're far more attuned and aware and awake to the ordinary of life. Things are just ordinary. It's just the way it is. There's good, there's evil, there's happy, there's sad, but the mind of insight sees these things as impermanent, it's not self, so it's kind of ordinary. But it's not ordinary in a way of aversion or looking down on, it's just ordinary because it's not attached to the highs and the lows, the ups and the downs, it's just ordinary. It's nature, natural. This year is New Year, Chinese New Year. They always have a nice symbol for their New Year. This year it's the year of the tiger. So tiger means a lot to many people, usually associated with power, energy. But they say there's different kinds of tigers. There's the very, obviously they're also associated with aggression. So there's the aggressive tiger. They're also associated with sleeping around a lot. The sleeping tiger. We hear about the sleeping tiger, the person with lots of energy and potential, but it's just waiting for the right conditions, the sleeping tiger. So it also brings up reflections on tigers. As monks, we go, well, maybe not so much these days, but in the old days, in Thailand we used to go off into the forest to at least be in places where there's a chance you might meet a tiger, because it really stimulates the mind, but not necessarily in a happy way. It stimulates it in a way of waking yourself up to the danger, the threat, the risk. It can be quite a useful thing to do, to go into the forest where there are tigers around. So thinking of Year of the Tiger, that brought up a few memories. I was thinking of one year I was living with Ajahn Anan at his monastery, and somebody offered a beautiful Buddha, bronze Buddha again, huge one it's called Buddha Chinnaraja. Buddha Chinnaraja is the most famous Buddha statue in Thailand. It's the one in Pitsanolok, and sort of is seen as one of the symbols of Thai Buddhism. So it's the Buddha sitting in meditation, but with this halo around him. It's usually made in brass, so very heavy, ornate Buddha. And it was sitting in underneath the meditation hall for many months, unused, and no monastery had asked for it, no one had requested it, no one had an idea where to send it. So in the Vasa, it was probably around 1996, I think, if I remember. So maybe 25 years ago, I had the bright idea of asking Ajahn Anan if I could take it to Dao Dam, the forest monastery on the Burmese border that I had gone and stayed at many times, where Ajahn Siripanyo lives today, which is a big forest, largely untouched forest, and they just have a few simple buildings there, a few kutis and a hall, not very undeveloped place. And they had a very small Buddha in the hall they use for their meal. So I had the thought, I could take this Buddha and offer it to them. So in the Vasa, which is rainy season, maybe not the best time to visit Dao Dam, we had the idea of taking it over there for a couple of days as a journey. And we asked one of the monks, his brother was a policeman, and he had a four-wheel drive ute. So we had him drive, and I sat in the front, and then two other monks in the cab. There was a sort of thin cab for them. And then we put the Buddha in the back of the ute, only just fit, and we headed off from Rayong to Kanchanaburi, which is 12 hours drive or something, and we were a bit concerned that the border police, and there were checkpoints, you might think, what are we up to? But anyway, we had a policeman with us, so we had our secret weapon, and we headed off. And the policeman did all the talking when we were checked by the army and the border police. Where are you going with this big Buddha? What are you up to? So far so good. They all sort of saw the monk, saw the Buddha. And then just as we were arriving at the monastery, but a few minutes before, maybe 20 minutes before we arrived, and we were coming overland through these streams that are flooded and a very muddy road, coming towards the monastery. And at the monastery, there are just a couple of monks bending the reins there. And they were getting it ready for a visit by the Crown Princess, who was going there as part of her job as head of all kinds of wildlife and nature organizations in Thailand. She's on the board and very supportive of protection of the forest. And someone had invited her to go there to see the general area, and particularly to see the monastery, because there were so many old growth trees, untouched forest, and wild animals there. So that was going to be a few days after we arrived. So they were getting ready for her visit, and there was one man there called Winsor, who was a Burmese refugee, and he only had one leg and used a crutch because, unfortunately, like so many people, he had stepped on a landmine, because there was still a lot of fighting in those days on the border, and lost his leg. So he was given a kind of job in the monastery just to help out, do things, give him a bit of wage and a place to stay and free food. So his job to prepare for the princess's visit was to plant flowers all along the track into the monastery, which is just a mud track, but the Burmese were very skilled. They had these flowers which would open up within a few days of planting. And he knew they wouldn't last very long. A lot of rain, they'd probably get washed away because the river's flooded all the time. But he was diligent, hardworking, and he'd sit there all day planting these little flowers all along the side of the road to make the road into the monastery look really beautiful in a very natural way. So the day we arrived, he was sitting there by the river, which was in flood but not disastrously. He was sitting there planting another set of these little flowers. And just before we arrived, this tiger walked out from the bush. And he said it had probably been asleep, sleeping off a kill maybe, had eaten something and just been sleeping off overnight or whatever. Because this was the middle of the day. We arrived sort of middle of the afternoon, and it was a time you don't usually see tigers. So it came out, he said it was kind of walking wobbly, a bit like it was drunk, meaning it was drunk with sleep, towards him. He's only got one leg. So he looked at it and he said, hi, and he got on his crutch and just wobbled off as quick as he could. He told us the story. We all felt sorry for him when he was telling us when we arrived, because it had only just happened and he was a little bit shaken. He said luckily the tiger was probably full. It had eaten something the night before, hence it was sleepy because it had been sleeping off its meal. And it didn't chase him. He said it would have been easy food for the tiger. But he hobbled off back to the hut where he stayed, just waited. And then we turned up in our ute with the Buddha, and the tiger was already gone. So everyone thought it was an auspicious sign, mainly because it didn't eat windsor. And tigers are signs of success in many situations, success, good karma, energy. So the tiger kind of like announced the arrival of the Buddha. And the Buddha came, and we got everyone to lift it off the truck, and we couldn't find a right spot to put it because it was so heavy. We thought it might collapse the very wooden platform where the monks ate their meals. So we had to leave it under cover for someone else to decide where to put it. But that place, Dao Dam, occasionally gets tigers, wildcats. In those days it still got stripy tigers. So I had a few encounters over the years there. One time I was staying there with Ajahn Anan, and he was staying in one of the kutis. There's only 3 kutis, but myself and a few other monks went across the valley and stayed in our mosquito nets and umbrellas just in the open forest. And the first night I was just brushing my teeth about 6:30, so it's just getting dark. Brushing my teeth, a very innocent, ordinary situation, and heard this footsteps coming down the hill towards me through the leaves. I couldn't tell whether it was a human, because you did sometimes get refugees walking out of Burma through the monastery, and I thought, is it a person? But I couldn't see because it was getting dark. And then there was the thought, oh, maybe it's an animal, one step at a time. Tiger, yeah, it's quite heavy. So I just carried on brushing my teeth, tried to be as ordinary as I could, mindful, ordinary, unfast, unfazed. And by then I'd spent many years staying in the forest of different places, so I wasn't really scared, but I just tried to keep my ordinary state of mind, mindful, alert, aware. And I continued brushing my teeth, and up it came, and yes, it was a tiger. So I shone my torch, because I was using my torch to brush my teeth, because it was by now dark. So I shone my torch on it, had the nice slitty green eyes of the tiger and a stripy face. It didn't growl, but it went down the way they do before they spring. So I just tried to keep my mind ordinary. I'm just a monk, brushing my teeth. So he circled around me as I continued to brush my teeth. And then he didn't attack, he just went off and sat on the other side of the stream, because I was camping next to the stream where monks often camp, and started growling, and he growled all night long. And we assumed, he wasn't expecting me to be there, because it was the first night. And he, or she, maybe it was a she growled all night long, expressing distaste at finding an English monk in her pathway, her hunting ground. And then in the morning at dawn, we get our bowls and we walk down 45 minutes down the valley to where we can collect food. And I met one of the Thai monks who had come with us. He came up to me with a white face. So even Thais can have a white face sometimes. He was a bit more junior than me and more inexperienced in the forest. He said, "Ajahn, did you hear that?" And I said, "Yeah, I heard that." And we had both heard the tiger growling at us all night long, but nobody was hurt. So that was one tiger story from one year when Ajahn Anan visited. There was another year I visited Dao Dam. Again, it was a tiger story, and they actually asked, all the monks were staying there. There's quite a lot of monks staying there, maybe a dozen monks from Wat Nanachat were staying there. And at tea time, we were all camping in the forest, so at tea time they all said, "Oh, Ajahn, you're always meeting tigers. Can you tell us some tiger stories?" And I said, be careful, because be careful what you wish for, because if you talk about tigers, you tend to meet them. So I gave them an hour of tiger stories, because I have many, both personal and from other teachers. Maybe it's because I'm born in Year of Tiger, I don't know. But I told them some of my tiger stories and told them how to practice metta and compassion for these wild animals and bring the mind to this state of ordinariness, because really, tigers are not to be afraid of. They're just creatures caught in their own karma. They have a miserable life running around the forest. They get hunted themselves, they are attacked by things, and they get their food by attacking other things. They don't have a happy life. So just feel sad for them, compassion, and try and maintain your ordinary state of mind rather than getting caught up in the fear. That was the basis of my teaching. And then we meditated, we chanted, and we meditated until about midnight, because it was the observance day. Then we split up to practice on our own. So some monks were walking back to their camp in the forest, and one monk was going along the hilltop, and what should he encounter but a tiger? So around 11 o'clock at night he encountered a tiger, and he's on this tiny little footpath that you can't kind of run away from a tiger on that path, because it's right on the side of the mountain. You can't really walk past each other either, so he just froze with fear. He was an Australian as well. Not that that makes much difference, but I just remember that. And he shivered. He said he just shivered from head to toe, because it was a big tiger, maybe 4 meters from head to the end of its tail. So it's a big stripy tiger, perfectly possible of killing a person. And again, it crouched down. You could see its eyes, its face, and it's crouching, which means it could leap at any moment. So the tiger was on guard. The monk was on guard. He's just shaking and shivering. But then he had a spark of wisdom. So he started chanting Iti Piso. So So you think of the Buddha, whether it's a Buddha statue or the historical Buddha, think of the Buddha, and he started chanting Itipiso, the 9 main qualities of a Buddha. The Buddha is an arahant, fully awakened, enlightened being. He's teacher of gods and humans. He's awake, holy. He's the blessed one, the knower of the worlds. All these good qualities of the Buddha. He started recollecting them as he chanted over and over again, Itipiso, which settled his mind at a time when he said he was panicking and thought he might just go crazy with fear. Maybe even the tiger liked the words, or it meant something to the tiger because the tiger didn't attack. It just crouched, and then it gradually walked past him on this tiny little mountain path. And he says, so close, he could smell it, and it smelt of death, because they just eat things every day, kill things, eat things. Had very heavy, deep breath. And it walked slowly past him. But because it was so tight, he could almost just stroke it, but he didn't. He just carried on chanting, and then it was behind him. And it turned and also was on guard behind him, but it didn't attack. So he just carried on chanting Itipiso, and now the path ahead was free. He could start walking with the chant in his mind. So this is both an advertisement for the chant, what to do when you meet the tiger, also just a reflection, isn't it? Tigers live in the forest, unhappy lives, difficult lives. We should really feel sorry for them rather than afraid of them. Anyway, he got away and he didn't get attacked, although he was very shaken, traumatized for a while. So that's a few tiger stories associated with Daodam Monastery. But everything we are doing in the Buddhist practice, is bringing us to this state of mind that we say is the mind of Tammada. It's just ordinary. The ups and downs of life, the successes, the highs, the pleasures, the fears, the risks, the very ordinary, normal things, the things that bring up aversion. Our main aim is to bring up mindfulness, develop the reflective power of the mind, to just bring the mind to this state of ordinariness, where you can just reflect on whatever you experience, good or bad, and just see it as ordinary. It's just the way it is. So you don't create a problem out of it or a suffering out of it. So there's some reflections for Chinese New Year, the Year of the Tiger, and in honor or commemoration of the Buddha statue that we've just made and is soon to arrive in Australia.